$128 million floor general, their leader, their veteran voice, and now he's gone, out for the entire season with a torn ACL. For a young team with playoff dreams, this changes everything. Today, we're breaking down how VanVleet's injury might derail the Rockets' season before it even begins. The news hit hard across the NBA. Houston Rockets guard Fred VanVleet has suffered a torn ACL, and reports confirm he will miss the entire 2025-26 season. For Houston, this isn't just another injury. It's a crushing blow to a team that was finally starting to climb out of years of rebuilding. VanVleet wasn't only their point guard. He was their leader, their veteran voice, and the anchor that made all the young pieces fit together. When the Rockets signed VanVleet to a 3-year, $128 million deal in 2023, the message was clear. This was the player who would bring championship experience and stability to a young roster full of raw talent. VanVleet had already proven himself with the Toronto Raptors, helping them win a title in 2019 and carving out a reputation as one of the toughest, smartest guards in the league. In Houston, he wasn't expected to score 30 points every night. His job was bigger than that. He was the floor general, the one who set the pace, organized the offense, and made sure the Rockets' young core didn't collapse under the pressure of expectations. Now, all of that is gone in an instant. A torn ACL isn't just a short-term setback. It means a full year of recovery, rehab, and uncertainty about whether he will come back at the same level. For the Rockets, it leaves a massive hole in both leadership and playmaking. Without VanVleet, who runs the offense? Who calms the team down when the game gets out of control? Who makes sure young players like Jalen Green, Jabari Smith Jr., and Amen Thompson stick to the plan? These are the questions Houston suddenly has to answer. What makes this injury even more devastating is the timing. The Rockets were entering the season with optimism. They had shown flashes of growth last year under new head coach Ime Udoka. Their defense had improved. Their young players were starting to figure things out. And with VanVleet running the show, the goal wasn't just to compete, it was to fight for a playoff spot in the loaded Western Conference. Now, that dream feels like it's slipping away before the first tip-off. VanVleet's absence also sends a shockwave through the locker room. Young players often look to veterans in critical moments, whether it's late in a close game or after a tough loss on the road. VanVleet was the one who had been there before. He knew what it took to win at the highest level, and his calm, steady presence gave Houston's roster a sense of direction. Without him, that locker room leadership has to come from somewhere else, and that's not easy to replace. For Rockets fans, this feels like deja vu, another season derailed before it starts. But for the front office and coaching staff, it's more than just disappointment. It's a test of whether Houston's young players can rise up faster than expected, a test of whether the team can find balance without its leader, and most importantly, a test of whether the Rockets' rebuild can withstand a setback this big. Fred VanVleet's injury doesn't just change the Rockets' depth chart, it changes the entire direction of their season. So now the big question, who replaces Fred VanVleet in Houston's rotation? On paper, the Rockets still have plenty of guards, but none of them bring what VanVleet provided. His leadership, his decision-making, his ability to control tempo, those are intangibles that don't show up on a stat sheet, and that's what makes this injury so damaging. The first name that jumps out is Amen Thompson. Drafted 4th overall in 2023, Thompson is electric. He's 6'7", incredibly athletic, and one of the fastest guards in the league with the ball in his hands. He can slash into the paint, finish through contact, and disrupt passing lanes on defense. But here's the problem. He's still raw. Thompson isn't yet a natural floor general. He has the physical tools, but he hasn't proven he can run a half-court offense at the NBA level for 30-plus minutes a night. Asking him to step into VanVleet's shoes this early in his career is a massive gamble. Then there's Jalen Green. The former second overall pick is one of the most talented scorers on the roster. He's flashy, explosive, and can drop 25 points in a hurry when he's locked in. But Jalen Green is not a point guard. He thrives off the ball, coming off screens, cutting into the lane, and creating highlights in transition. Forcing him into a playmaking role could hurt both his growth and the Rockets' offensive balance. If VanVleet was the steady hand who kept the offense organized, Green is the spark plug, and those are two very different roles. Dillon Brooks also comes into the conversation. He's the fiery competitor, the emotional engine of the Rockets' defense, and the kind of player who thrives on intensity. But Brooks is not a playmaker either. He can defend, he can bring energy, and he can provide leadership through his toughness. But he isn't going to replace VanVleet's basketball IQ or his ability to control the flow of a game. The Rockets could try a committee approach, splitting responsibilities between Amon Thompson, Jalen Green, and even bringing in bench guys like Aaron Holiday for spot minutes. But none of those options give Houston the same stability they had when VanVleet was on the floor. Without him, turnovers are likely to go up, ball movement could stagnate, and late-game execution might collapse. These are the small details that separate playoff teams from lottery teams. Another concern is the impact on the team's young bigs. Alperen Sengun has quietly become one of the Rockets' most important players, especially as a passing hub out of the post. With VanVleet gone, there's a real risk that Sengun doesn't get the ball in the right spots at the right times to maximize his playmaking ability. Jabari Smith Jr. could also see fewer clean looks if the offense turns into isolation-heavy basketball without a steady point guard setting the table. This is why VanVleet's injury cut so deep. It's not just that Houston lost a player. It's that they lost the glue that made their young pieces fit together. Without him, the Rockets will be forced to experiment, shuffle lineups, and throw their young guards into roles they may not be ready for. Sometimes that works out and players rise to the occasion, but sometimes it backfires and slows down development. Either way, the Rockets' rotation is about to look very different, and how they adapt could define their entire season. Before the injury news broke, the Rockets entered this season with one clear goal: make the playoffs, not just the play-in, but the real postseason. After years of rebuilding, losing seasons, and lottery picks, Houston finally felt like it had turned a corner. The roster was young, energetic, and guided by a proven veteran in Fred VanVleet. With Ime Udoka, a tough-minded coach who demands defense and accountability, there was real optimism that this team could surprise people in the loaded Western Conference. Now, those playoff dreams are hanging by a thread. To understand just how devastating this is, you need to look at the context. Last season, the Rockets finished 41-41. That's a massive improvement from where they were just 2 years ago when they were sitting at the bottom of the standings. The addition of VanVleet was supposed to push them over the top from a rebuilding team to a playoff contender. He wasn't the Rockets' best scorer, but he was the one player who had already been there, already lifted a trophy, and knew what it took to win under pressure. That experience can't be overstated, especially for a roster filled with players under 25. But in the West, there's no room for error. The defending champion Denver Nuggets are still stacked. The Minnesota Timberwolves, Oklahoma City Thunder, and Dallas Mavericks are all surging young teams. Veterans like the Lakers, Warriors, and Clippers are still in the mix. That's 8 or 9 teams right there fighting for playoff spots, and every one of them has proven all-stars leading the way. The Rockets, they just lost theirs. Without VanVleet, Houston's margin for error becomes razor thin. Close games that could have been managed by a steady veteran hand might slip away. Those 4 or 5 game losing streaks that playoff teams usually avoid, they become more likely. And in the brutal West, that's often the difference between the 6th seed and being stuck in the lottery. The bigger issue isn't just wins and losses, it's expectations. Rockets fans and even the front office had set the bar higher this year. This wasn't supposed to be another development season. This was supposed to be the year where the franchise proved its rebuild was complete, where young players like Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün got their first taste of playoff basketball. That kind of experience is invaluable for growth. And now with VanVleet out, it's possible those plans are delayed another year. Of course, it's not impossible for Houston to still make noise. They have talent. They have a coach who won't let them quit. Sometimes a setback like this can even fuel a team, forcing young stars to grow faster than expected. But let's be honest, the road to the playoffs just got a whole lot tougher. Instead of aiming for the 6th or 7th seed, the Rockets might be fighting just to make the play-in tournament. And in a best-case scenario, sneaking into the 8th seed doesn't carry the same energy as establishing yourself as a true contender. That's why this injury doesn't just affect Houston's present. It affects their timeline, their momentum, and their ability to prove to the league that the Rockets are back. Without VanVleet, the season goes from we're ready to compete to we're trying to survive. And that's a painful shift for a franchise that was finally ready to turn the page. So here's where the Rockets stand. In one moment, everything changed. Fred VanVleet's season-ending injury didn't just take away a point guard. It ripped away the steady hand that was supposed to guide this young roster into the playoffs. Without him, Houston is left with questions, experiments, and pressure on players who may not be ready for it yet. The rotation is shaken. Amen Thompson now has to step into the spotlight much earlier than expected. Jalen Green faces the challenge of proving he's more than just a scorer, that he can carry a team when it matters. Şengün and Jabari Smith Jr. must grow into bigger roles, while Dillon Brooks becomes the emotional leader by default. In other words, this isn't just about replacing VanVleet's numbers. It's about finding out if this young core can take a massive leap under fire. Meanwhile, the front office has decisions to make. Do they trust the kids and stay patient? Or do they chase trades and veterans to keep the playoff dream alive? Either path comes with risk, and either path will shape the Rockets' future for years to come. So I'll throw this to you. Can the Rockets survive without VanVleet? Do you believe Amen Thompson and Jalen Green are ready to lead? Or should Houston make a bold move and bring in another veteran guard? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading everyone. And if you love breakdowns like this, where we dig into not just the headline, but what it really means for a team's future, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, this season is going to have more drama, more twists, and more stories like this one. And we'll be here breaking it all down